Between February 10 and 20, 2021, freezing temperatures persisted across Texas for over 150 consecutive hours. Electric generation declined by more than 50,000 megawatts. Natural gas production dropped by half. Water pressure failed in hundreds of systems. No physical infrastructure was destroyed. Systems designed for brief cold exposure simply stopped when cold remained. Texas electricity infrastructure operated on the assumption that winter demand peaks were brief and predictable. Natural gas wellheads, power plant intake systems, and wind turbines were not uniformly protected against prolonged sub-freezing conditions. The Electric Reliability Council of Texas managed a grid serving 26 million people with limited transmission ties to neighboring interconnections. Reserve margins were calculated for summer air conditioning load, not extended winter heating demand. Water utilities maintained surface operations without deep burial or heat trace common in northern climates. The system functioned reliably within historical temperature and duration bounds. A southward displacement of the polar vortex brought Arctic air into the central United States beginning February 10. Temperatures across Texas fell below 32 degrees Fahrenheit and remained there continuously in most populated areas. Dallas recorded 139 consecutive hours below freezing. Austin experienced temperatures near 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Overnight lows reached -2 degrees Fahrenheit in regions where infrastructure had never been tested below 10 degrees Fahrenheit for more than short intervals. Precipitation fell as freezing rain and snow. The cold was not record-breaking in absolute terms. The duration at sub-freezing temperatures exceeded design assumptions by 3 to 5 days. Natural gas wellheads froze as water vapor and raw gas formed hydrates and ice blocked valves and separators. Production in the Permian Basin and Eagle Ford declined sharply. Coal piles froze into solid masses. Instrumentation lines at thermal plants failed. Wind turbine blades iced over and several sites shut down due to frozen gearboxes and control systems. By February 15, over 30,000 megawatts of thermal generation was offline. Additional capacity tripped offline due to low gas pressure and fuel supply interruptions. Total generation loss exceeded 50,000 megawatts. No single technology was immune. All generation types experienced cold-related failures simultaneously. Electric heating demand surged as temperatures dropped. Residential resistance heating and heat pumps operated at maximum output continuously. ERCOT system load exceeded 70,000 megawatts during overnight hours, well above winter planning forecasts. Simultaneously, available generation fell. The gap between demand and supply widened beyond the capacity of reserve resources. By early February 15, operating reserves dropped below emergency thresholds. Grid frequency began declining below 60 Hz, indicating insufficient generation to meet load. Automated systems initiated load shedding to prevent total grid collapse. Approximately 10.5 million people lost power. Restoration was not possible while generation remained offline and demand remained high. ERCOT operates largely independent of the eastern and western interconnections. Import capacity through DC ties was limited to approximately 1,200 megawatts, insufficient to replace lost generation. Neighboring grids also faced load stress. Texas could not import its way out of the deficit. The isolation that typically provided operational independence became a constraint. Load shedding continued not due to transmission congestion, but due to absolute generation shortfall. Areas with generation still online remained energized. Areas selected for rotating outages experienced continuous blackouts as operators had no generation to rotate back into service. Controlled rolling outages became uncontrolled sustained outages. Utilities had planned for brief, rotating load shed events lasting 30 to 90 minutes. Instead, entire service areas remained without power for 48 to 96 hours. Restoration required generation return, fuel supply stabilization, and load rebalancing. Each dependency was linked to sub-freezing persistence. As long as temperatures remained low, gas wells stayed frozen and heating demand stayed elevated. Grid operators maintained load shedding to prevent total collapse. No manual override existed to restore power without available generation. Duration exceeded all operator training and planning scenarios. Municipal water systems lost pressure as electric pumps went offline. Pipes froze and ruptured in homes and treatment plants not designed for prolonged cold. Boil water notices were issued across the state, affecting more than 14 million people. Treatment plants could not operate without electricity or pressurized lines. Storage tanks drained without refill. In some cities, pressure dropped to zero. Residents resorted to collection from streams or emergency distribution points. Water failure compounded heating loss. Systems designed with no redundancy for simultaneous power and freeze exposure collapsed in sequence. Restoration required both electricity return and physical pipe repair.
Electronic payment systems went offline. ATMs required electricity and network connectivity. Fuel stations could not pump gasoline without power. Retail locations closed. Residents with cash could not access goods if stores had no power or supply. Natural gas heating in some areas continued, but required electric igniters or blowers, rendering systems inoperable. Food spoilage occurred in unpowered refrigerators. Pharmacies could not dispense temperature-sensitive medications. The financial transaction layer, dependent entirely on electric and data infrastructure, ceased to function in blacked-out zones. Commerce halted not due to demand collapse, but due to infrastructure dependency and visibility. Urban and suburban populations experienced multi-day periods without electricity, heat, water, or connectivity. Indoor temperatures in homes dropped below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Residents burned furniture or used vehicle exhaust for warmth, leading to carbon monoxide exposure cases. Hospitals operated on backup generators with constrained fuel supply. Dialysis centers canceled appointments. Roads remained iced over, limiting movement. Emergency services were strained. No violence or collapse of civil order occurred. Populations adapted through informal resource sharing and shelter consolidation. The experience was defined by quiet endurance in stationary cold, not chaotic breakdown. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and North American Electric Reliability Corporation issued a joint report in November 2021. Findings identified lack of winterization across generation fuel supply and electric generation as primary causes. Recommendations included weatherization standards and reserve requirement updates. Texas legislature passed Senate Bill 3 mandating weatherization and grid reliability standards. ERCOT revised planning assumptions to include extended cold duration scenarios. The event became the reference case for cold weather grid vulnerability in temperate climates. Documentation focused on infrastructure gaps, not operational errors. The failure was structural, not procedural.